Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. All right, we have speed, we have video, had some lost frames. I'm going to keep an eye on that. I'm busy, thanks to your patronage. I have on order a new NVMe drive and some a memory module to upgrade another laptop. I'm hoping to run off a desktop just because of the I/O efficiency and performance, actually, specs. This laptop that I bought a couple years ago is an excellent laptop, but it is a little bit lacking in I/O, as all laptops are, to be honest. But this one has a more powerful processor and higher spec USB I/O. And so as soon as I get it up to measure, I'm going to transfer my production work here, the recording of the videos, onto it to see if I can get rid of that dropped frame problem that has been plaguing me for the last year. Doing pretty good right now. I've done everything I could figure out to do to hone my efficiency here, but I am working with a laptop on long form videos. Not ideal, but hey, you do what you can with what you've got, right? And in getting all of that to function as well as it does, I have a huge, huge gratitude to all of your liking, subscribing, and especially to those patrons who have the great facility to offer a little bit of monthly financial input. And I'm not saying little bit by putting it down. I'm saying it doesn't take a donation of thousands of dollars, although it would be put to good use. All of the donations, all of your support goes into Gohonzon. It's all about promoting this practice. Sorry about the distraction there. So even small dollar donations, when they're consistent, they really add up over time to allow things like, you know, changes of equipment, improving of our resources for practice, for solidifying our resolve, and with study and through this Sangha. You know, our Sangha is all over the world. It would be incredibly difficult and costly to round us all up on a regular basis to meet face to face. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But the next best thing is to be electronically connected. I know it's not live, like a Skype meeting or whatever medium. Maybe one day, but I've tried a couple of times to go down that road, and quite honestly, the amount of work, regular financial cost, constant. I see, that's why I try to minimize, because we don't have a huge fund to draw from. So I can't invest in something that I don't feel secure that the funds to maintain it will be there. Do you understand? I mean, it's one thing to have the cable company come out and put equipment in so that you can get connected to the internet. But there's a fee for that, and that fee just begins with the connection, then it's a monthly. And if you don't make it, you lose it. So rather than try that, experiment with it, maybe really enjoy it, and then it goes away, that'd be a total bummer. So I'm staying away from that. I'm trying to be responsible because consistency, as you know, is the name of the game with this practice. You must chant every day. You must do Gongyo, learn how to do it, and be consistent. Because that consistent training every day is what trains our monkey mind to do what we wanted to do. Explore our life fully, affirmingly, without all of the distractions that lead us to pain, anxiety, stress, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't take long if you stop and you go, I'm taking a break for a while. Those monkeys are what? He's not chanting? She's not doing Gongyo? And they start showing up. And it doesn't take long before even in our dulled samsaric senses, we think, oh, crap. The old stuff is coming back. I mean, I've done it. I remember seeing that so viscerally, just identifying things that I'd forgotten I'd left behind. That really is jarring. And something starts occurring in your life and you think, wow, I forgot that was a regular occurrence in my life before practicing. Wow, it just came right back. Maybe in a different form, maybe it looks different, but you can identify it. You know it. And that's Buddhism. Buddhism is a living experience. It ain't book learning, right? I mean, we use a lot of books to dive into translations of Shakyamuni's teachings, but it's a matter of adjusting our minds and keeping our minds trained on our enlightenment rather than all the foibles and competitions and ownership and loss and all of that. That's samsara. We don't need that. All the stuff is still there, but our attachment, our emotional roiling about stressing, anxiety, we could do without that, right? So, that's the sermon for this morning. As we get back into Mr. Suzuki's introduction to the Lankavatara. I know, when the heck are we going to get to the Lankavatara? We will, promise. I was just looking a couple days ago, we have over 860 videos on this channel. And so it's important that you know how to look stuff up on this channel. On the home page of the channel, there's that little search icon, that little magnifying glass next to the videos, playlists, about section in the middle of the page. That's the search you want to use because that stays within this channel. If you use the top search, you're going to go all over the world. You're going to Google, right? Whereas if you use the search in this channel, you can put a keyword in there and you'll get a result set that's in this channel that has to do with, right? And just like I added the link the last couple of days to the Wuji to You and Me video, that has an illustration of the 9 consciousnesses and a good time. That's from December of last year. So, but even I had a hard time finding it. Setting things up so the search works well is a whole other maintenance game, yeah? Anyway, so he's talking about the 8th consciousness, which at this point, I suppose, is the highest level of consciousness in the teachings at that point. Not sure about that. I think the 9th consciousness, in some form, and maybe in this form, he's labeling the Alaya consciousness like that border wall between our samsaric thinking and attachments and our karmic freight train, yeah, which it is. But without the ninth consciousness, the Amala, the Buddha consciousness, which in the last video, if you haven't seen it, you should back up and go see that. I put up several I'll put them up again in this video, but not all of them. Just the ones that show that triangle idea that I came up with of movement through time-space, divided by the consciousnesses. And when we invoke the ninth, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, the ninth actually wraps around all of the consciousnesses. I made that illustration because there's always been this confusion that the ninth consciousness, like he's talking here, is something outside of the 8 consciousnesses, which he is identifying as our samsaric mind. And it is a very key point. That's why I keep hammering on it, that Buddhahood isn't outside of this samsaric experience. It is part of it, right? You've heard the words inherent, our nature, it's built in, all sorts of words to that effect. Buddha-ness, our enlightened mind, is part and parcel of our collection of consciousnesses, like seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, feeling consciousness, taste, smell. Those are all consciousnesses that we have a very physical attachment to in samsara. But the mind consciousnesses, we can't point to, we can't excise them, we can't take a surgeon and find them, but they're no less real, aren't they? So if you get that all the way to the 8th consciousness, surely adding a 9th consciousness that is Buddhahood within the sphere of us individually shouldn't be a great surprise. However, it's not in here. So either Mr. Suzuki doesn't want to refer to it at all, doesn't know it, or it's just a state of Mahayana at the time of the Lankavatara. I'm going to leave that to you. But I need to identify it because that's the great difference, the great separation between this period of Mahayana and the Lotus Sutra. In the Lotus Sutra, we absolutely not only know the 9th consciousness, but we activate it. That is what the Lotus Sutra is. It's, hey, time to Buddha. You do it. Namu. I'm doing it. Myoho Renge Kyo. That's what I'm doing. Right? So, here we go. The Alaya, the 8th consciousness, according to the Lanka, has 2 aspects. The Alaya as it is in itself, the repository moment-to-moment of our freight train of karma, and we've already read where that freight train of karma is something moment-to-moment that we accrue and add to via our actions, action and energy, karma, right? And depending on the quality of those actions, are they life-affirming or are they life-unaffirming? Are they attachment and stress and anxiety, or are they freedom, emancipation, fully engaging without the judgments, right? Without, what did he say? Infatuations. What's the other word we used in the other videos? Entanglements, right? Which is the Sagathamkam, wow, called Paramalaya Vijnana, and the Alaya as mental representation called Vijnaptir Alaya. These 2 aspects are also known respectively as the Prabandha, or the incessant, and the Lankshana, manifested. Okay. This is going to be a tough Indian language day. I don't know why he has to put all that in, but he's showing his scholarship. The Alaya is incessant because of its uninterrupted existence. It is manifested because of its activity being perceptible by the mind. So this is the tie-in to consciousness, right? The Alaya is a label for the process of you and I's instantiation, right? All of the energy and amalgams that amalgamate and accrue and instantiate as you and me individually, and consequently, in our human form, in our manifested moment-to-moment form, that is what we cling to as an identification of self, and build our ego on that, right? And so he's pointing out that it is manifested because of its activity being perceptible by the mind. So the mind, which arises from this cacophony of energies, karma, self-perceives just by witnessing the activity of this instantiation, right? From this, we can see that the Alaya is conceived in the Lanka as being absolute in one respect, and in another as being subject to evolution, pravriti, which is what I was saying earlier. This freight train comes from the beginning of the universe, really, and it's instantiating as a you, a me, a her, a them, right? In that way, it's incessant. It's always going on. And this is just a manifestation of it, this being, this ego. But also, every moment, every thought moment, right, we are accruing more, jumping on the train like hobos, yeah? It is this revolving aspect of the Alaya that lends itself to the treacherous interpretation of manas. As long as the Alaya remains in and by itself, it is beyond the grasp of an individual, empirical consciousness. It is almost like emptiness itself, although it ever lies behind the Vijnana activities. Well, that's a mess. I mean, you and I know that, right? For the latter will cease working at once when the Alaya is taken out of existence, which that speaks to something I say all the time. Once your instantiation of physical reality is done, when your body dies, so too does the mind stop to operate. It has nothing to emerge from. So this is it. This life is it. Enlighten now or forever drift. Well, forever in this life, drift, yeah? Manas is conscious of the presence behind itself of the Alaya and also of the latter's uninterrupted working on the entire system of the Vijnanas. Again, this is circular, this is hermetic, right? Reflecting on the Alaya and imagining it to be an ego, that's not right. The ego is born of all the manas, all the other consciousnesses that are constructing and identifying ourselves, which is something altogether different from our karma, our karmic freight train. Yes, they're connected. Yes, they're related. But ego isn't the karmic train. Ego is the mind attaching itself to qualities it's constantly evaluating and identifying in order to construct a straw man, right? A constructed self. You could argue that the Alaya, the storehouse of that karmic train, is a construction also. But that construction happens as a part of the process. That's just energies manifesting. The judgment of those manifestations is the province of the mind, and the mind is where the ego occurs, not in the Alaya. That's just a storehouse. Follow? It's slippery. But without the ninth consciousness, this is the kind of slipperiness you get. Manas cling to it as if they were reality and dispose of the reports of the six Vijnanas accordingly. In other words, manas is the individual will to live and the principle of discrimination. Not wrong. The notion of an ego substance is herein established. This is where we gel. An ego substance is our identification of stuff, self, beingness in samsara. It's all attached. That's how we perceive of the ego, and then we fool ourselves into thinking the ego, the self, is a real thing. We skip past the step where we've made it a real thing by comparing and evolving and craving and identifying everything about us, right? Ego substance is herein established, and also the acceptance of a world external to itself and distinct from itself. You've heard me say this in so many ways, I'm not going to go into it. The six Vijnanas function, as it were, mechanically, when the conditions are satisfied and are not conscious of their own doings, right? You see things, you see colors, you see shape, you see things that you think in your mind, ooh, I like that. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, that makes me hungry. Ooh, I want that person in my life. I want to, so on and so forth. You're not thinking, my eyes see that, and my brain is cataloging that as something I've seen before but different. And that's not me, but that is mine. And that mineness comes from the different mano consciousnesses that I have, and I remember how that tastes, feels, smells. We don't identify everything that way. We just take for granted that all our senses, our consciousnesses, our six lower realms are having at it, and we're just judging and discriminating and desiring and craving and running from and claiming. That's what we're doing in our samsaric mind. We don't identify all the processes, right? That's what he's saying. They have no intelligence outside of their respective fields of activity. The eye eyes, right? The nose smells, the mouth tastes, the body feels. That's just what they do. The body bodies, in modern parlance. They are not organized in themselves and have no theory for their existence and doings. That's our mind that does that. Our mind accrues all of these different functions, mechanical, he says. Sure, physical, I say. And we catalog everything they do into something meaningful. Unfortunately, that meaning generally means, right, constantly, identification. This is who I am. Yeah? What they experience is reported to the headquarters with no comment or interpretation. Manas sits at the headquarters and, like a great general, gathers up all the information coming from the six Vijnanas, for it is he who shifts and arranges the reports and gives orders again to the reporters according to his own will and intelligence. Aren't we brilliant? The orders are then faithfully executed. I'm going to get me some of that ice cream. Let's go, feet. The manas is, and your mouth is watering because, right, these same consciousnesses. The manas is a double-headed monster, the one face looking towards the Alaya and the other towards the Vijnanas. And that's a way of saying that we're driven by our karmic freight train, but we think, even though that's the part we then identify as, that's me, I like ice cream. That's our peek back at the energies that form our every moment. And then we think we're taking control and we go act on it. And we're just slaves to our karma. Isn't that amazing? It's the tree analogy all over again. We think we're in control, but, in the next moment we hit a branch and we have to react and change everything, but we think we're in control. He does not understand what the Alaya really is. I keep hitting these branches. What the hell's going on? Discrimination being one of his fundamental functions, he sees multitudinousness there and clings to it as final. That's the basis of cravings and attachment, isn't it? If I define every single thing around me, then I'll know me better. Because that's who I am. Oops. There's the whole formula, folks. The clinging now binds him to a world of particulars. Identity. Thus, desire is mother, and ignorance is father, and this existence takes its rise. But the manas is also a double-edged sword. When there takes place a turning back, here we go again with that rhetoric, in it, the entire arrangement of things in the Vijnakaya or Sita Kalapa changes, right? And I've talked about this in a different way. It's usually some kind of trauma. Something happens, it's a non sequitur. You didn't expect it. It came out of nowhere, right? That's the lingo we use. I don't remember how it happened. It just happened. I woke up one day and... we say that this is in our popular rhetoric all the time. And what we're identifying is an unexpected shift. And yet our manas, because our ego cannot be destroyed, our samsarically attached mind will put together an explanation. And it'll alter our life, right? A life-changing moment. Ever heard that? After that day, my life changed. Yeah, because your ego is a clever son of a gun. It will identify yourself to death, quite literally. This is what we're trying to liberate ourselves from. That cacophony of identity. It's taking away our experience of life to the full. Because we're so busy discriminating ourselves into a little patch of it. How can that little patch be so fulfilling? It's not. Namo Myo Renge Kyo, poof. I'm billions and billions of patches. Oh my goodness. I have limited myself to almost disappearance. Myself is so much more. Buddha, yeah? With one swing of the sword, the pluralities are cut asunder and the Alaya is seen in its native form, that is, as solitary reality, which is from the first beyond discrimination. Now here's where we're going to have a bit of a difficulty, because in truth, that awakening is Buddhahood. It's not the Alaya. Because as I've already described, the Alaya has the history of the universe in it. But in every moment that your consciousness are working, you're adding to that sum influences and alterations, evolution, as he said earlier, right? So the first beyond discrimination, that would be really outside the Alaya. There has to be a ninth consciousness. That is just perfect clarity of the whole thing. No matter how evolved the Alaya becomes, it still owes its existence to the formations, the alaya, is a storehouse of forms, isn't it? Karma is forms of thought, of feelings, of energy. And we're born of those amalgams. But those are forms. They're already forms. Buddhahood is the formation of energy prior to instantiation, form. That energy is almost like a hum. It's not a tune. It's not a note. It's not a phenomena. It's nomina from which phenomena emerges. And that emergent grouping, instantiation, amalgam, that's the alaya, with which we interrelate every moment, 3,000 realms, in every moment of manifestation. Do you see how all this ties together now? And the ninth consciousness is that from which the forms come. So you can go all the way back to early writings in Hinayana and reevaluate Shakyamuni's discussion of the cessation of formations. And now you can reevaluate those statements for what they really, truly indicate. As I've said before, Shakyamuni didn't change what he was teaching. He just changed how he was teaching it for particular audiences. So here we are again. And I realize I'm jumping in and out of the Lankavatara here because we have to, because we're Lotus Sutra. And with our Buddha wisdom and our knowledge and our capacity, we can see right past that statement. But we know what he's trying to point to, so we can get the meaning, but we also get the limitation. That's the fascination of study, especially of earlier sutras, right? We can see what we digest and practice whole, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, forming through the teachings. It's fascinating, right? The manas is not, of course, an independent worker. It is always depending on the alaya, without which it has no reason of being itself. Right? It's just like if you die, there's no mind to perceive you being moment to moment, the 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. There's no realms. Now you're outside of formation, form. Right? But at the same time, the alaya is also depending on the manas for perception, for experience of this process of life. It's all about experience, experiencing. And that occurs only in the mind. That's the shift we're trying to achieve. The alaya is absolutely one, but this oneness gains significance only when it is realized by the manas and recognized as its own supporter, the alamba. This relationship is altogether too subtle to be perceived by ordinary minds that are found choked with defilements and false ideas since beginningless time. Okay, rather grand statement, but okay. The manas backed by the alaya has been the seat of desire and thirst, trishna, right? Karma and ignorance, right? Karma and ignorance, dukkha, life. The seeds grow out of them and are deposited in the alaya. Well, that's that accrual of action upon energy, creating more karma or influence of existing karma, right? When the waves are stirred up in the alaya ocean, oh, here comes an ocean simile, by the wind of objectivity, so interpreted by the manas, these seeds give a constant supply to the uninterrupted flow of the Vijnana waters. In this general turmoil in which we sentient beings are all living, the Alaya is as responsible as the manas. For if the Alaya refuse to take the seeds in that are sent up from the region of Vijnana, manas may not have opportunities to exercise its two fundamental functions, willing and discriminating. Right? Volition, craving, and at the same time discerning, differentiating, identifying. But at the same time, it is due to the Alaya's self-purifying nature that there takes place a great catastrophe in it known as turning back. With this turning back in the Alaya, manas so intimately in relation with it also experience a transformation in its fundamental attitude towards the Vijnanas. The latter are no more regarded as reporters of an external world, which is characterized with individuality and manifoldness. This position is now abandoned. The external world is no more adhered to as such, that is, as reality, for it is no more than a mere reflection of the Alaya. The Alaya has been looking at itself in the Mana's mirror. There has been from the very first nothing other than itself. Hence the doctrine of mind only, Citamatra, or the Alaya only. So that is a limitation of this point in the development of the teachings of Mahayana. And I would say there's a slippery slope he's identifying here. He's trying to suggest that the turning back is the realizing point, which you may extract from my definition of trauma, where everything we thought we knew has changed, and therefore the world isn't a solid thing anymore. It's suddenly a little squishy, a little loose, and that we're nothing but our freight train of karma, which has existed since before we started thinking about it, seeing ourselves. It's destabilizing, right? But to say that that is a turning back, again, this is because there's no consideration of the ninth consciousness here. That's, in his vernacular, the most turning back. It's the most in the moment. In other words, less dependent on all of the manas, all the discriminations, the identifications. But that's not a complete picture, because the truth is, as I said before, that Alaya, that beginning Alaya makeup of the freight train of your karma, my karma, is constantly being accrued. And he said it himself, evolves with the imposition of discriminations and experience. In this statement, he's saying that all gets thrown out, and to some degree he's not wrong, but the karma that it turns back to is affected by the duration and the influences that have been imposed on it. So there's a little bit of a gray area there. Let's not dissect it any further. It won't benefit us. But I just want to identify it, yeah? The religious signification is the next chapter. Shall we leave that? Maybe I'll do a chapter. It's not a chapter, but a section. The necessity of conceiving Alaya in its double aspect, one as absolute reality and two as subject to causation, comes from the Mahayana idea of Buddhahood. Interesting. Let's go a little further, because this is what I've been hoping to see. Let's see how he interprets Buddhahood. If Buddhahood is something absolutely solitary, all the efforts put forward by sentient beings to realize enlightenment would be of no avail whatever. If it was some separate, vaulted thing, then we'd never have any hope of achieving it. We'd just be playing in the Alaya, right? In the manifested state, in the accommodative state. Think about it. In other words, all that the Tathagata wants to do for sentient beings would never have its opportunity to reach them. There must be something commonly shared by each so that when a note is struck at one end, a corresponding one will answer at the other. The Alaya is thus known on the one hand as Tathagata Garbha, the womb of the Tathagata, and on the other hand, imagined by the ignorant as an ego or soul, or Atman. Yeah, he's identified in short terms, the problem of the capacity of the people learning Shakyamuni's teachings. That's what he's defining here. That if you can't see beyond the Lankavatara, Alaya consciousness, that freight train of karma, then you might mistake that freight train of karma as your eternal soul. Which, as you know, I have, Shakyamuni has, many scholars have railed against that interpretation because, as we know, there is no soul. There is no eternal bucket of Bob or box of Betty or, right? All of those, how many times I've said it, yeah? But culturally and in the romance of our egos, we can't accept that we aren't a permanent thing because we permanentize everything. It's very difficult to make that shift of mind that sees energies instantiation, moment to moment, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. We keep wanting to say, yeah, but it's a birth of all of that. No, it's right now this is instantiating as it stands. And in the next moment, it will stand differently because of influences by our consciousnesses to that freight train of karma. And use the freight train analogy. When a train runs along a track, you can hear it going ka-tunk, 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 ka-tunk. And you could mistakenly say that that's the sound of a train moving over a track, and it's always the same. But if you go look at those tracks, every single railroad tie, every single spike, even the condition of the steel is actually quite varied millimeter to millimeter. There may be something sequential that we identify, qualify, hear, and see, and tell ourselves the story of the regular ka-dunk, 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 ka-dunk. But if we had more powerful instruments, more powerful ears, eyes, feeling, vibrations, and we could get to electron microscope, let's say, vision. Could you imagine? Oral acuity to insane levels that we could hear a cricket 10,000 miles away. Could you imagine? I'll guarantee you with those kind of senses, we could hear the differences between every ka and every thunk. We would know that that sound is, for that instance, describing that moment with the weight of the train, the shape of the wheels, in other words, condition of the wheels, so on and so forth. You see, you could take it apart and imagine and see much better than your regular old perfunctory senses will, which is, again, an analogy to Buddhism. We run along superficially understanding our life, and yet, when we peer more deeply through all of the consciousnesses to our core instantiation, Buddha-ness, we can observe all of it as just decorations for something much, much more profound and larger. Wow. Yeah? So let's just finish this and then we'll call it quits on this video. The Tathagata Garbha, therefore, whose psychological name is the Alaya Vijnana, is a reservoir of things good and bad, pure and defiled. Right? It's all judged, discriminated, identified. Expressed differently, the Tathagata is originally, in its self-nature, immaculate, but because of its external dirt, it is soiled. And when soiled, which is the state generally found in all sentient beings, an intuitive penetration is impossible. Well, there, my friends, there is the source of, and I fear that Suzuki is stuck in this as well. His very statement there indicates that permanentizing soul. When he says the Alaya consciousness is in its self-nature, well, that's the end of the argument. Because as you and I know, studying the Lotus Sutra, studying everything that ran up to the Lotus Sutra, even if you go all the way back to Hinayana, nothing has a self-nature. Nothing. That's the very definition of impermanence. So how can this scholar then say that the Tathagata Garbha returns to its own self-nature? Well, that's the obsession of the idea of a soul, and it has no place in Buddhism. So let's see what he says after that. When this is impossible, as is the case with the philosophers and ignorant masses, the Garbha is believed sometimes to be a creator. There's the God delusion, right? And sometimes to be an ego substance, like a soul, atman. As it is so believed, it allows itself to transmigrate through the 6 paths of existence. Let there be, however, an intuitive penetration into the primitive purity of the Tathagata Garbha, and the whole system of Vijnanas goes through a revolution. If the Tathagarbha, or Alaya Vijnana, were not a mysterious mixture of purity and defilement, good and evil, this abrupt transformation of an entire personality would be an impossibility. That is to say, if the Garbha, or the Alaya, while absolutely neutral and colorless in itself, did not yet harbor in itself a certain irrationality, no sentient beings would ever be a Buddha. No enlightenment would be experienced by any human beings. Logicalness is to be transcended somewhere and somehow. And if, as this illogicalness is particularly possible, the Mahayana establishes the theory of the mind only. He's circling around a good idea there. He really is. The way he has stated it, though, it's painful because he's trying to squeeze and shoehorn the idea of emancipation in something that he has clearly defined as a phenomena. The 8th consciousness, the Alaya consciousness. And it's just, it doesn't fit. There's a 9th consciousness, and it envelops all 8. That's why this is such an important teaching to understand. This, along with the 3,000 realms, along with all of the realms, the 10 realms, the conditions, the factors, all of those things, you can see how they arise out of a necessity of this drilling down of how does the mind work. And it requires that we define a 9th consciousness that is not formed. The Alaya is formed, therefore it is a consciousness which is formed. It is a, as he says, can't be transcended. It just is what it is, and it's a function. It's not a static thing. It's a constantly evolving function, moment to moment to moment, in which our vijnanas dump our experience of each moment, whether it's solidifying, influencing, eschewing. It's a constant activity, moment to moment. So how do we escape it? Well, we can't escape it within it. We have to remove ourselves from it. So we call the Amala consciousness a consciousness, but it's a consciousness by name only, a Buddha consciousness, because it's unattached. It's not part of phenomena. It's an instantiation of awakening to nomina while we observe phenomena. So it's an odd kind of middle place, isn't it? A broken free of the mire of attachment without complete disappearance. It is only availed to us with a perceiving mind, because that's the tool for us to experience it. And when we die without that mind, then there's no Buddha-ness. There is just the function that's been there all along, the universe, the creator of life. Everything's still happening the same way. It's just that our experience of it with the mind can only exist within our physical manifestation, because that's from that is what the mind emerges. It comes into existence as a perceptive tool, right? What's called the Buddha eye. Unattached. Don't think detached right now, even though now you will, because I said it. So, okay. The next one is ontology and the twofold egolessness. That should be interesting. So this will be our starting point next. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice, for listening, for study, for your conviction, for your support of this Sangha, right? Like, subscribe. If you can, please also see if you can donate $1, donate a regular recurring amount. Every little bit is super important. We're not like a big, huge organization. It's just you and me. I like it that way. I like it personal, you know. So this is our resource. But don't feel pressured. I mean, if you can, you can. If you can't, then that's okay. What you can do for the Sangha is keep practicing. Deepen your conviction. Demand your Buddha-ness. Right? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thanks again. You know the links. They're all over this video. Patreon, PayPal, the bookstore, the mandala store. Right? And don't forget threefoldlotus.com. Lots of free information there. Let me know if there's something you'd like me to add to that storehouse of information. No problem. I'll figure it out. It's either I'll find it there, because there's lots there, or I'll combine and find my research and put them into a logical form to answer the need that you described to me. And I'll put a button on there and put a PDF on there, and there'll be access to that information for everyone, right? It's all free. So far, anyway. Free for you guys. And I'll just continue doing my work of propagation any way I can figure out how. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Take care of your health. Be kind to yourself. I'll see you in the next one. All right. Bye for now.